According to the very latest reports in the press, well over 20 different officials have come forward to make allegations of possible bullying against the government minister, Dominic Raab. But before him, there were allegations involving Conservative MPs complaining that they had been bullied in a crucial vote over fracking in October 2022. And before that, there were allegations over Priti Patel, the Home Secretary in Boris Johnson's government, and allegations were made that she had also been someone who had broken the ministerial code over bullying. Indeed, the government's advisor on standards resigned over that particular incident because Boris Johnson, after the report into her behaviour, chose to back Priti Patel and said he didn't think she was a bully. One of the questions that arises is there some kind of psychological explanation that could account for why there's so many allegations of bullying at the very highest levels of government? One of the reasons why it's highly likely you're going to find a lot of allegations over bullying and they're not really going to go away, they're going to come again and again, is that the very characteristics that you find at the top end of politics lends itself to bullying. For example, the current Conservative leadership find themselves in a high-stress situation. There are many gloomy predictions over the economy. In the polls, they're not doing well. In any organisation under stress, and where the leadership is under stress, you tend to find allegations of bullying emerge. Bullying occurs when people find themselves in high-stress situations, and it's one of the ways they deal with the stress and try to make difficult things happen in high-stakes situations. Another reason why you're going to find bullying allegations are going to be a recurrent theme in present-day government is you've got two different streams of people working together. One stream are politicians who get elected every 4 to 5 years, who are under pressure to perform and to deliver results in a very short time frame. Those politicians are working with another group of people called civil servants. Those civil servants are in salary jobs where they're not going to lose their jobs every 4 to 5 years in general. There's obviously going to be a direct conflict between these two groups of people. And you find that in any organisation where bullying comes to the fore, you have fundamental conflicts between two different groups of workers, and that tends to produce allegations over bullying. Another reason why it may seem surprising that there's so many allegations about bullying at the top end of government is that a lot of times a bully has no idea that they actually are a bully. Instead, a bully has a view of themselves that they are very good at getting people to do what they want, so they see themselves as a great leader and they represent themselves that way. So often they have no insight. And because one of the category of bullies is that they are pleasers and they try to please their superiors, these people who are bullies are often very popular with people further up the chain in the ladder of command. So because they get positive reinforcement from people further up the chain, that again helps them not to see their behaviour for what it is, and the workers who are being bullied further down the chain often are too frightened to complain. So this constellation of circumstances and events often means that bullies are completely blind to the fact that they are actually bullies. One of the theories about how you deal with this is part of workplace culture education is to call out and identify through an educational process, often done through human relations departments, human resources departments, what bullying actually looks like and how something that looks like forthright and great leadership can actually be bullying in disguise. One of the things we know about the psychology of bullies and explains why there may be quite a high prevalence of bullies and bullying at the senior levels of government is that bullies are often linked in some sense with conflict. they have a view of the world, a kind of worldview that is very conflict-ridden, and they see politics as a them and us type situation. So they see politics as adversarial, they see it as a war, and many bullies in the workplace take a view that there's a them and us relationship between the managers and the workers. Do they view the world as a kind of them and us, villains and heroes, black and white, conflict-ridden place? Because there's a certain kind of politician who sees the world in that way, and that kind of politician is going to take a more adversarial approach and is more prone and more vulnerable to end up with allegations of bullying. When we talk about bullying, we tend to think that bullying is something that used to happen when we were children and at school, and that once we leave school, we can leave bullying behind. In fact, the research evidence is really quite startling, that maybe bullying is occurring in the workplace, whatever kind of place of work you have, as frequently, if not more frequently, than at schools. The statistics suggest that between a third to a quarter of all employees in various workplaces have directly experienced some kind of bullying at work. The other problem is that workplace bullying is something that people often don't want to talk about, but has massive mental health implications. Many people suffer quite serious clinical depression and anxiety as a direct result of workplace bullying. It's probably one of the biggest hidden causes of quite serious mental illness in people's lives. The research evidence on workplace bullying is very interesting in terms of its implications for government and politicians. It finds there are basically three types of bully. The first type is called the self-righteous bully. This is a bully who believes that they're right and they need to get the job done, and accusations of bullying are misplaced and being leveled by lily-livered workers who just basically don't want to work and are lazy. You're going to see that with this category, it's almost inevitable at the higher end of politics and in government, you're going to see a lot of self-righteous bullies. People who are often delusional in their belief that basically they're very good at what they do, they get the job done, and bullying is just a slanderous attempt to get in their way and stop them achieving what they need to achieve. The other key category of bullies are surprisingly called pleasers. Pleasers are people who are bullying you in the workplace because they're under pressure from people above them to get the job done. In order to please their superiors, they're willing to bully you in order to attain targets. Again, you can see why this kind of bully is going to be very common at the senior levels of government and in politics, because this kind of bully is ambitious and wants to move ahead and climb the greasy ladder. Therefore, they're willing to please their leaders regardless of what's being asked of them. The final kind of bully, that maybe is the kind that most people are familiar with, is what's called the fearful bully. This is someone who's insecure and envious of other people in the workplace, and so they target people through their insecurity and their fearfulness. Again, this kind of bully is likely to be found very commonly in politics and government, because often politics is run by people who are very frightened in some sense, and that's why they flee into politics as a way of dealing with their fundamental fearfulness. The thing that's hit the headlines recently is people complaining about bullies. There are alleged to be over 20 people complaining about Dominic Raab. Several people may have complained about Priti Patel. And this is telling you something about the standard response to bullying that most workers have. They're following the advice, which is go and complain. But it's also telling you, if so many complaints have been made about particular ministers, that maybe this policy doesn't work. After all, if so many people are complaining, the behaviour must have continued over a long period of time. So as a psychiatrist working in clinical practice who's used to dealing with people who are the victims of workplace bullying, I'm not a big fan of the classic advice, which is go and complain to your local HR department. Very often that does very little, and very often you are identified now as a clear target for the bully. So what can be done if you find yourself the victim of workplace bullying? Well, the first thing to observe and notice is there's usually a triggering event of some kind. And that triggering event will be you're asked to do something and you say no. The people who end up being bullied are often the people who are most forthright and authentic. They get targeted because they're clear in the fact they often say no to a bully, and then the bully decides the only way to get them to agree to do the thing the bully wants them to do is to bully them. So one classic technique in this situation is to learn something from the psychology of hostage negotiation. When gunmen take hostages in a siege situation and the police send in a negotiator, and the gunmen say, we want a Boeing 747 at Heathrow, and we want £100 million in gold bullion on board the plane, and we want it by 5 p.m. The negotiator never says no. Never say no to armed gunmen holding hostages. You always say something like, we're working on it. That's a very useful technique to use in the workplace. When asked by a bully to do something, you never say no, you say, we're working on it. In other words, there's a form of words that look like yes, but may be more like a no. Never say no directly to a bully, because if you do, you become a target for that bully. Another series of things that you can do in terms of dealing with a bully is never be found in a private space in the office with a bully. Always, always be in a public arena. Bullies find it more difficult to target you and make you a victim if you're surrounded by bystanders who can observe the bullying. So be very careful never to go anywhere where you will be alone with the office bully. Another thing that's useful to know, and we tend to think about bullies, is that they are people who have enemies, and that is true. They bully a lot of people and they will have enemies. All bullies, because of the way they look at the world, also have favorites. Find out who the office bully's favorite is, get close to that favorite person, and very often that favorite person who has more influence on the bully will get them to stop bullying you. The research on how to deal with office bullies is fascinating because one of the most obvious strategies is something that people are reluctant to do, which is to call out the bullying for what it is. People are often afraid to do that, but the research evidence is that if you hint heavily that you feel you're being bullied to a bully, that can often be quite effective. You don't want to say something direct like, I think you're bullying me. You want to say something a bit more indirect, like, I had an experience a bit like this in my previous workplace, and it was found to have been classified as bullying. So hint very heavily that you are concerned that what you're experiencing is bullying, and that often gets a bully to back off because they're a bit afraid of the consequences that might follow. The multiple complaints that some people are facing, and one thinks of Dominic Raab at the moment, by many people is a clue as to how to handle allegations if you believe that you are the victim of a bully in an office. And that is, if you are going to make a complaint, don't do it as an individual. Anyone who is bullying someone in the workplace has usually done it more than once. There'll be a series of people. They'll leave a trail of bullied people in their pathway, in their background. You need to find other people who feel they've been bullied and group together and make a group complaint. That is much more powerful, and has definitely been indicated that by the way the newspapers are reporting the current spate of bullying allegations, that as a group you're much more likely to be effective than if you complain as an individual.